Good morning. I must say, this has a completely different vibe than some of the other creative conversations we've done in the past. I didn't anticipate being at a podium. I was imagining maybe we'd be using the Getty cafeteria in a multi-purpose room or some such, so bear with me as I breathe. It's so good to see everyone here. This could be potentially our largest turnout ever for a creative conversation. I'm curious just to get a read on the crowd. How many people have been to one creative conversation in the past? Anyone been to 2? Anyone been to 3? 4? 4? Okay, well, I think that's a little bit indicative of the fact that we're growing exponentially now. I think our first creative conversation, probably 2004 or so, 2003, back when Sophia Klatzker was organizing them, there were probably, 20 folks or something. So this is so great. I wanted to give opening remarks that basically contextualize the day, first starting with the most broadest piece, or the most broad piece, excuse me. What is an emerging leader? The slightly more rigid definition, defined by Americans for the Arts, is a young professional working in the arts sector who is either 35 years or less, or has 5 years or less experience in the arts sector. And I think many of us kind of push that profile, which is great. We believe that we're always emerging, and it's great to have professionals that haven't had 1 year in the field. It's also great to have professionals who have had 20 plus years in the field. So we are all embracing, but that is kind of the formal definition. And really, if you kind of look at the makeup of our group, a lot of us do kind of fit this profile. Basically, the Emerging Leaders Council emerged in about 1999 when a cohort of young professionals stepped back at a national arts conference and realized that they were really underrepresented at that conference. And they questioned, are young professionals getting the professional development opportunities that they really need to be cultivated and sustained in the field? And so this group of about 12 people that included Leslie Ito, who now works at the California Community Foundation, Greg Esser, who now works at the LA County Arts Commission, they decided to work with Americans for the Arts to establish a kind of support system for emerging leaders nationwide. And basically, Americans for the Arts took this council under their wing and provide online presence, opportunities for convenings, having a voice at convenings, and an online listserv. One of the most significant initial contributions of the Emerging Leader Council was the concept of the creative conversation. The creative conversation is a national movement to encourage local networks to develop grassroots professional development opportunities. And the thought in many cities, it works, was that creative conversations might spark the formation of a local emerging arts network. There are approximately 50 creative conversations happening across the country this month. Topics are ranging from cultural diplomacy at home and abroad in Reston, Virginia, to redefining public art in Eugene, Oregon. Our topic today, carefully crafted by our Creative Conversations Committee, Turning Points, Strategies for Success in Arts During Times of Transition, is brilliantly broad. We can all relate to and respect the ability of change to excite us, threaten, inspire, and totally freak us out, often for the better. Many of us emerging leaders are still feeling out our careers, feeling out the nonprofit sector itself, trying a new strand of the field, considering a return to academia, or even starting a family. The menu of options are really fun to shop, but it can be very intimidating to take the plunge in one direction or another. That said, I think there's really a willingness to embrace and a nimbleness around change that young professionals have. You might even say our generation, Generation X, Generation Y, mostly really kind of thrive on change. We seek change in an effort to be stimulated and challenged. Sweeping generalizations and glorifications of millennials aside, I really think that these characteristics are indicative of our age, not necessarily of our generation. And I think that regardless, navigating change is never a cinch. So this brings me to talking about the Emerging Arts Leaders Network and the fact that we're really transitory by nature, and therefore must reckon with change that results from member turnover. Active members typically stay involved for about 3 to 4 years on average, and that's basically the point. The goal of our network is to usher the next generation into leadership positions, and basically to help members emerge. So in thinking about this, the Emerging Arts Leaders Network must really develop a tight leadership succession plan. And that's exactly what the Emerging Leaders Network is in the midst of. Right now we're undergoing pretty radical change and therefore transition. To provide a little bit of context, however, for this change, I want to give a brief history of the network. In 1999, there was an Emerging Arts Leaders Network that established itself in Los Angeles. Some of those members include Angie Kim from the Getty Center or the Getty Foundation, Danielle Brazel from Arts for LA, and Renee Williams from the Music Center. They did their thing. I think they even wrote a white paper, spread that around, basically got their message out that they did have a need as well for professional development and sought it together, joined boards, etc. And ultimately they did emerge, which is a success story. But after that happened, probably in 2003, the network became dormant. And it wasn't until John Arroyo, who was at the time working with the Los Angeles County Arts Commission, was elected to the Emerging Leaders Council with Americans for the Arts, that the current Emerging Arts Leaders Network re-emerged. And that was about in, again, I think 2005. What we decided to do, what really kickstarted the network, was a creative conversation where one of the topics was mentorship. After that creative conversation, there were about 10 of us who got together and said, okay, we're going to make this happen because no one's going to hand it to us on a plate. So we went through basically almost a 2-year-long process, creating the framework for what is now called Arts Professionals Advisors Link, which is currently active. There are folks in the room now that are being mentored through this program. But at the same time as we were planning that, we decided we needed to step back and really think about the bigger picture for the network. How are we serving the 200 plus other folks that are on our Google group that really identify themselves as emerging leaders? And so we went through a planning process and ultimately came out with kind of a plan to operate on what we called at the time network theory, which was basically a way to not have to force ourselves to take established leadership positions and really kind of focus on a non-hierarchical infrastructure for the network, where we would operate very organically. Hubs of activity would pop up and diminish as, based on their natural ebb and flow. And after we grew to a point of robustness that we didn't have the capacity to operate on network theory, the Irvine and Hewlett Foundation swept in. And they noticed that we were doing work that actually aligned with some of the things that they were really interested in supporting. I don't know if you guys remember the white paper that they released in 2006 called something like Critical Issues in the Art Sector. One of those critical issues that emerged from the study was that emerging leaders, young professionals in the field, weren't being supported to the level that they might need to in order to remain in the field. And so I think the Irvine and Hewlett Foundation, unbeknownst to us, were watching what we were doing and decided, hey, they're kind of doing the work that we know needs to happen, and why don't we look to fund them? And so in 2009, they asked us whether we would submit a proposal. And about half a year or more later, we got a grant for $75,000 over the course of 3 years. We had operated completely on zero budget. So when I talk about radical change, this is what we're grappling with right now. And it's very exciting because the Irvine and Hewlett Foundation have really given us carte blanche to basically be experimental, use the network as a laboratory, and really focus on serving ourselves. It's kind of dreamy. But they also want us to think about planning and make sure that we were creating a sustainable network, which we're doing right now through a strategic planning process. And before I move to the strategic planning process, I will say that the Irvine and Hewlett Foundation are funding networks statewide. They're funding San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, and San Diego. And we've been convening on a quarterly basis representatives from each network to talk about kind of ideas, strategies, that kind of thing. And I think that that is also useful in basically sustaining the networks. And our next convening is actually going to be in Los Angeles. How many people are planning on coming to the Otis Economy Report, or Creative Economy Report Out? Excellent. So after that meeting, we'll be having a more intimate conversation with Dr. Ann Markison about the survey that many of you filled out this summer about emerging leaders, and that was a statewide survey. So we'll be kind of crunching the numbers and using them as benchmarks moving forward. And back to basically the strategic planning process. It has been an awesome process so far. We have one of 2 meetings, or 3 meetings down. It's been productive, fun, and just a good professional development experience. So if you're interested in joining that process, feel free to contact, I don't know if Camille Schenken is here today, or if she has arrived yet, but you can talk to me and I can put you in contact with the right people. With, I think, the change that comes with this funding, we really need to think as a network how we're going to sustain relevant and fresh programs. How are we going to make sure that we're focused on serving the membership, but also doing fundraising? These are some of the questions that kind of freak me out as we deal now with kind of this funding stream. So as we listen to our speakers today, I'll be interested in pulling some pearls of wisdom that might inform the transition that we're undergoing. And basically on the note of going through this change and requiring basically new members to get involved, I really entreat everyone who's here who isn't actively involved to join us. This is really a network about not only being a participant, but being a producer. What you see here today was generated by 10 or more individuals who really got a great experience probably through planning this. The real benefit truly comes from the planning process and using this as a forum for experimentation and doing something innovative and totally different. I wanted to take that opportunity to thank the Creative Conversations Hub. I would like to just ask all of them to stand up now, and let's give them a round of applause. I would also like to thank the J. Paul Getty Museum and staff, particularly Heather Licey in events and Larry Cushman, our AV tech for the day, for their just absolutely generous support in hosting us here and making resources available for the event. And with that, I would like to pass it off to Kim Cordova.